new business is a really viable career path for a lot of people in this industry. And a lot of people that look like us are some of the best representatives of the power of who our agencies can be and who our people can be.
Welcome to Her Agency, the podcast. I'm your host, Brandi Rand. This is a space curated for Black women in advertising who are bold enough to pick up the pen, write the brief, take up space, and own their agency. Welcome to another episode of Her Agency, the podcast. I am Brandi Rand, and if you are interested in breaking new barriers in advertising, being a leader who leads with empathy and soul, this conversation is for you. I have none other than the queen of business development in the agency space, Miss Courtney Williams. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. I think it's important to center Black women in advertising, and I think that you hold a unique role, and we're going to get into the lane that you take up and the space that you take up in advertising, because it's not typical. And I want to expose that to people potentially looking at our industry. But first, before we get into that, I want to ask everybody, so I'm going to ask you, what is the one time in your career that you were super proud about using your agency?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me.
Absolutely.
I was really excited to get the note. This is such an important thing to do, especially now in this time, to put Black women in our stories back on the altar where they deserve to be. So just thank you for doing that.
And then altar, yes.
Yes, the altar.
Yes, the altar.
With our throne and our crown, everything
and the
we deserve.
Crown.
I loved when I saw this question, because there's been a lot of times, but I think there's one that's probably most memorable for me is that back in 2020, everybody was questioning everything about life. And it just felt really unexpected. It felt really daunting. And there was like two options on the table. You could either sit in that and just be upset and honestly just like stay in this moment of uncertainty, or figure it out. And I wanted to try to take whatever control I could take back of my life, whether it was personally or professionally, and just do things for me. And so for me in 2020, it looked like taking risks. It looked like shooting my shot for opportunities.
Yes.
It looked like being my biggest champion, which is something that I think all of us struggle with at times, to root for ourselves and amplify ourselves. And so for me, it meant talking to my now husband and just saying, hey, we're in Atlanta, Georgia. How would you feel if we took a risk? How would you feel if I shot my shot at this agency in my dream role that I've always wanted, and we moved to Virginia? And what would you say? And he immediately was like, if it's about you, I say yes. Okay. And to have that support from, again, my now husband, to just take the risk, apply for a job at the Martin Agency, which is where I lead growth and business development now, it was a dream come true. And I never would have done it if I would have just sat beside my computer or behind my computer, never would have really put my foot down and wanted to stand 10 toes down for me for once. And for me, that was such a pivotal role, because I fought for me and what I needed and what I wanted to do. And it has propelled my career so far.
There was like 20 gems. That was question one. That's the intro.
Thank
20
you.
gems. Shout out to you. There's so much that resonated there, and I think a lot of people can relate to. First of all, the uncertainty.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And there's two sides of the coin. Like, make a decision on how you're going to now manage your approach to the uncertainty.
Right.
I know a lot of people, and even myself included, we kind of wallowed in it a little bit.
Oh, yeah.
Some people wallowed in it too long. Some people are still even talking about how negatively that uncertainty impacted their career. And so I love that about just taking charge, owning it, and making a decision to move. But then shout out to the husbands.
I mean, shout out.
Okay.
Shout out.
This is the second time I've done, hey, boo, shout out.
Right. Hey, Devin. Thank you.
Hey, Devin. Hey, Devin. Because what did you say? If it's about you, then it's a
about
yes?
you, yes. And there's no other answer. And we looked at each other and we were like, we're doing this. Let's go.
Let's go. Let's go. And then dream job.
Yeah.
Sometimes people say there's no such thing. But when I hear you speak of your role, I know we talked on the phone recently, you are in your bag, like your zone of genius. But the amazing thing about it is it's not a typical role.
No.
First of all, it's not one that's talked about in the agency world. It's always the creatives. It's always the social, the data. Tell us more about your role.
Yeah.
What excites you most about the potential of it in the future, and what drew you to that?
So I am a self-proclaimed new biz junkie at heart.
Okay.
So for everybody listening, I am the VP head of growth at the Martin Agency. And you'll hear growth or business development or new business. There's a lot of different terminology for the role. But essentially our job is to help bring in net new revenue for the agency. So a lot of times the pitching aspect of my job is what gets glamorized. So you're going in,
Absolutely.
you're meeting clients, you do these big pitches, you throw down creatively, and then that's what you read in the press. But it's yes and there's pitching, and there's prospecting, and there's networking, and there's marketing. But everything at the core of what I do is about relationships and how can I continue to build relationship, build reputation, yes, for our agency, but also for our people. And because people want to buy people, not just brands, not just companies. And so if I can really start to hone in on who is the Martin Agency, and again, more importantly, who are the people behind the Martin Agency, and get them in front of new clients or new brands, that's what really helps start to attract new business. And that's why we've seen a lot of the success that we have. But to answer your question, new biz used to be such this taboo topic.
For sure.
And where I always felt like it was this discipline that only the executives got to be a part of. They'd go lock themselves in a room, and they'd come out, and all of a sudden you'd have a new piece of business. And I was like, where did this come from? How do I get in? And so I actually majored in public relations, and I loved it, but I also knew I didn't want to do PR for the rest of my life. It wasn't for me, but I loved the competitive nature, the writing, the relationship building. And I interned at an agency. And again, I've always been this curious, bold, tell me I can't do it, I'm going to do it. Tell me the stove's hot, I'm going to touch it. That's always been me. And so new biz was always this secretive, like I said, the secretive discipline that I said I need to find my way in. And so I went a roundabout way. I was an account intern. I was a strategy intern. And one day I got an opportunity. They said, hey, we want you to be in the room, but we want you to transcribe the meeting. And for any intern, you're like, well, that's probably the least exciting thing that I've ever wanted to do. I don't want to sit there and transcribe everything. It's before the chat GPT days where I could just listen. But it got me in the room, and it got me an opportunity to really see how all the work behind the scenes and building decks and studying insights and how creative ideas come to life. I got to see it come to life in a room. And I just, like I said, bit the crazy bug in that day, and I've never looked back. I applied for an internship at an agency called BBDO down in Atlanta, and it was a new biz opportunity. I got to report directly to the CMO at the time, and I've never looked back. And so new business is a job where for a while, there weren't really people that looked like me holding those roles. It was a lot of older white men who were on the face and representing these agencies. And even still. And the thing that I love so much about just how the industry and culture has evolved is that isn't enough, and that isn't okay anymore. And people want to see the people who are representing these agencies and these brands look like the people they want their brands to reach. And so, yes, it's a really great opportunity, but it's also a really big responsibility. Huge. Because I want to make sure that I'm representing myself and the Martin Agency in the best light, but I also want to make sure I'm attracting the right people, because at the end of the day, I work in new business. We court, we like to say we date for a little while, but then I hand you off to go get married to the account leadership team, the strategy team, and the creative team.
You do all the work.
And I do, but I want to make sure that that's a really compatible relationship. And so it is not a role that I take lightly, and I'm really excited to be able to talk more about the role of new business and growth, because I think you said this earlier, a lot of people don't see that as a potential path for them at an agency. And if I can help shed light that it is an opportunity and help people grow into the role of new business, let's do it.
Absolutely. You're kind of like the role of the matchmaker.
I like to say it.
Yeah.
One of our old CEOs told me that new business is like the gatekeeper of great opportunities. And again, that's a really big responsibility to have. And
I love what you said, because I have always been on the outside of like, oh, all of a sudden there's this new business we want, but how did we get here? The important part, though, I think, is understanding that if we have diverse people in new business, right, with a different perspective of all the historic other people who have been in new business, more unique brands come to the table. More fun and creative and diverse work comes to the table. All of the things that the creatives, the account teams, the strategists, the data analysis want to work on.
Absolutely.
Right? So if we don't have diverse perspective of going out and getting the new business, we won't get the work that the people in our agencies want to do.
100%.
That is so critical to understand. Because I worked at an agency, and our client roster was indicative of the people at the top, and it was stuffy brands that, didn't want to do social, digital, damn sure didn't want to do influencer campaigns at the time. But we just didn't have anyone bringing in and attracting that type of business. We certainly had people in the room that could do the work and wanted to do the work, but it just wasn't curating that way because of new business.
I also, to plus that point, I think having somebody who is diverse as the face of the agency and new business, you also get to hold the clients accountable for what they want, because that's a whole other thing. There's so much pressure on agencies, as there should be, to have and show up with diverse teams and responsibilities and attract new brands. But then you get these brands and you peel behind the curtain and see their leadership teams, and there's no diversity on there, yet they're demanding it from the agency. And so I love that I can also say, look, it is a responsibility for me to bring you a diverse team. Check. But what are you bringing to the table? However. Because if I'm going to build this diverse team who's going to bring you great ideas and you can't understand them and they're going to die and they're never going to see the light of day, then what are we all doing
Why
here?
are we here?
And so the pressure is really on both agency and client to bring that perspective and representation to the table so that you can go make and sell that great work.
That's crazy, Courtney. There's so much there. There's so much there. Because yes, holding them accountable, but it takes having that conversation, because so often we definitely have diverse teams on the agency side, but people able to understand the work on the brand side and who make the decisions and cut the checks, right?
Absolutely.
Release the coins for the budget aren't down for the type of work that we want to do. But then it also raises the frequency on calling them to task. Like, yes, you might be a best place to work. Yes, you might be a well-known brand, something that everyone who is diverse consumes. Right. But if you don't have leadership there, what are we doing?
100%.
That's so good. It just burns the candle at both ways.
Yeah.
It's such for me, that's if you see my aha moment happening right here. And I haven't been in advertising for 17 years and not understanding the specificity in which you just laid that out and how critical it is to the type of work that actually comes through for us to do. That's a major gem.
I will never forget there was an opportunity where we pitched an idea that was all around how you could use this tool as a feature. And we used the metaphor of someone who was playing spades. Okay. And it was a black family, black environment, and brought up a moment where you go to sit down at the table and everyone's like, do you know how to play?
Right.
And everyone's like, yes, 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 yes. And there was one person who was silent. And it was just this moment that obviously everybody in the room who was black understood naturally. Yeah. And the best part is that there were black women and men on the other side, on the client side, who also had that aha moment. And so to be able to have a strategist, creative teams go to deliver on it, be able to help sell the work through and making sure everyone on our side understood that insight, but then also to have the clients receive it so well and then have a reaction. I have never felt more seen by an idea, was absolutely incredible. And again, it only happens when you have that representation and the understanding on both sides of the table.
That sounds like the dream environment.
It was awesome.
Like start to finish, this unique cultural insight created or found by a diverse team, pitched to a diverse brand side team. That's magic.
It's incredible.
That is magic. That's the ideal world. I think that a lot of us wouldn't leave the industry or would get back in if we could have that unique situation. Yeah, because so oftentimes we have this great idea or this great strategic insight, and it's just like they cannot understand.
But I hate that it is so unique and so rare. And new business, for me, has always been a playground where you can test and learn. And not saying you can't do that on existing business, but in new business, clients come to you because they need help. Whether their last agency relationship isn't working well, sales have been down, they need a new spark. And new business is that spark for a lot of brands and a lot of people. And you should be able to have those conversations and bring those insights and show a new dynamic to a brand and a team and a new dynamic. And there's no better place to do that besides a new business. So it shouldn't be as unique as it is. And we've got to figure out more ways to bring that to life.
Yes, and I think opportunities like this to hear you tell that perspective will create that. Yeah. How do you define a strategic career move? You said you found your dream job and you were in Atlanta and picked up and moved. What's the approach to being strategic about your next move?
I think before you can even think about your move, think about where you are and where you want to be. And really identifying what is missing from what you have right now and where you need to go. And I think for me, it really does start with a really firm understanding of self. Because you can move around and that's when people start chasing things. But if you never know what you're actually chasing, then what are you doing? And
say that again. Just aimlessly.
If you never know what you're chasing, where are you going? And if you have to have a set goal, you have to have a North Star to make all of those moves make sense. And so for me, when I think about what a strategic move looks like, it's what is not fulfilling me now and what are the spaces where I need to go. And for me, it's always been easier to identify what's not for me than sometimes of what is for me. And so really figuring out what are the things that don't bring me joy or aren't going to get me to this moment. Or I sit in this seat now, my ultimate goal is to be a chief growth officer at an agency.
Yes.
And I have never wavered from that. And I'm very open about that, because not only do I want to reaffirm my own commitment to my goal, I want those around me who support me to understand. And we need to know. And that way also, if I'm making a move that isn't aligned with what that goal is, not only can I check myself, but the people around me can say, what are you doing? Why are you doing it for that reason? And so to me, again, it starts with a really firm understanding of who am I and what do I need, and anything that does not serve me in that moment, I'm not going to move forward quite yet. Because if so, again, I'm just going to be chasing this dream or this facade without actually having the fact of what I want to get to.
A major gem, because we're oftentimes told to raise your hand. If you want to be seen, do the extra work. Sign up for the passion project, the pro bono work. And that's cool if it takes you down the path of where you want to go. But if it doesn't,
do it.
You'll have resentment. You'll be wasting your time. You won't be available because you already raised your hand over here for the thing that comes down the pike that does align. That's so important for people just to take away of like making sure you know where you want to go so that all your moves align and track to that.
100%. And even if those ideas or those opportunities, you have to stop and even take a moment to sometimes reframe what that opportunity means. Because on one hand, if you just continue to say yes, then it starts just taking away from everything that you want to give to your main priority. But sometimes those opportunities, maybe they seem like baggage in the moment, but you can say, what can I bring to this opportunity to demonstrate that I can do X, Y, Z in order to get here? So it might, here's a horrible example, but even if you're tasked of just getting coffee every single day, at face value, that's horrible.
Very
and
mundane.
It's very uninspiring and very mundane, right?
Yes.
But it's how can I demonstrate that I can be proactive in this moment? How can I demonstrate that I can think 2 steps ahead of somebody else? And I hear a lot of younger talent and maybe interns or junior level talent saying, but it's just doing the same task over and over and over again. What can you do to reframe that task to make it a leadership opportunity? It can then bring you something that does add value to you. So a lot of it sometimes is just a reframe of the mindset of how you're viewing opportunities to make it fit that agenda that you have for whatever your career goal is or in that moment.
Mindset's key.
100%.
It's key. It's all about your perspective. What do you do to flex that muscle?
Ooh, that's a good one.
Keep a good frame of mind or a frame of reference?
That's a really great question. And it goes back to, again, just knowing myself. And I, especially in an agency, in new business, sometimes you get caught up in the hustle and the bustle. Finding the moments of just solitude really help ground me. And for me, it's traveling. It's getting outside of whatever my environment is and just being and really reflecting on like what are those things? What are those moments? And don't get me wrong, you can't book a vacation necessarily every time you need to have a little realization. But for me, it's go outside, take a walk, and just re-ground myself in what matters and why am I doing this? And if I don't have a why, then maybe I should be questioning if I'm doing it. And whether it's a task or a job or a relationship or whatever, if I don't understand the why behind it and the intention behind it, then it maybe it's not the right thing for me.
Business development, that can be like stressful.
Yes.
And challenging. What are some strategies you use to keep it fresh and to keep the business flowing? Because that's really all we hear, growth.
Yeah. It can be tough, and I don't want to sugarcoat it. It can be tough, but I think the way in which you navigate that and keep it fresh is just mixing up the people that you work with as well. There are some shops that I've heard, and I've evaluated their new business opportunities and their teams, and it's the same 5 executives that go into the room, and they're the only people who ever work on it. But mind you, everybody else is doing the work. But they're never getting the recognition or that feeling of pride for being able to see their work come to fruition. So one of the things that we really love to do is who are those next level leaders who are ready to be in a room? They just need somebody to see them and hear them and say, let's do this and I'll support you. That innately keeps it fresh because you're bringing in new faces, new people who are passionate about the businesses that you're talking about and the brands and are doing the work. And so it is so evident when they come and they're presenting their ideas that it came from them and that it came from a place of passion. And so for me, those are my favorite moments where somebody comes in and they say, hey, this is my first pitch opportunity. And then I'm like, remember this moment. Yes. And at the end of that pitch opportunity, I'm like, how do you feel? And they are so much more confident, so much more empowered, so much more ready to dive in, so much more motivated. And to me, that is what keeps it fresh. And new business should be something that people feel proud to be tapped for. And that's something I've always wanted to do and emulate, is that this should be fun. This should feel like an opportunity to show your growth. This should feel like an opportunity to show your ability to work with new people and be in new environments and solve business challenges. And so my job is, what can I do to remove the barriers that make it tough, that make it stressful, that make it hard for you, so that you can just do your job and have fun and enjoy the people you're doing it with. And that's the way you try to navigate the sometimes tough timelines and turnarounds and demands. But it all comes down to the people and making it an environment where they feel supported and free and safe to just thrive on creativity and whatever that means to them.
What were some moments in your career where you were given that opportunity? Because I can tell you mean what you say, and you're very passionate about, passing the torch or passing the baton or giving somebody a chance.
100%.
What were some opportunities that you had in the past, or some people that really served as a mentor or advocate or even a sponsor for you to try out the thing?
I think that is so important. Thank you for even recognizing that, because there have been so many opportunities, even from the very beginning when I started as a new business intern reporting to a CMO. I had a CMO who didn't even live in Atlanta at the time. He was bi-coastal. He was coming in and out. And it just, the trust and the independence to say, I trust you because I hear you asking the right questions. You're trying to find the right resources, and I'm going to give you this freedom to grow. I think that's what started my just passion and love for creating space and creating opportunities for people. I'm really blessed to have a lot of really great mentors and sponsors. And specifically at Martin, when I joined, we had a CEO, Kristen Cavallo at the time, and our CCO, Danny Robinson, who's now our CEO.
Yes, he is. Shout out to Danny.
Shout out to Danny. He's an incredible leader, and he just lets you be. And he just reminds you that you are here for a reason, and you are here we trust you to do that job, and we trust you to lead with whatever the tools you have and need to do to lead. And you need people who can empower you in that way to just be you. And for me, I've always been one of the youngest representatives of new business. I've always been like the only Black woman.
Yeah.
And so for me, like, executive presence didn't look the same as it had for a whole bunch of people before me. And so finding people along my journey, and there's so many people I could name from BBDO and 22 Squared and the Martin Agency and my communities just in this industry who have really protected me and supported me. How does this work for you? What is Courtney's way of doing it so that it can be the most authentic way of me showing up in this role? I'm so grateful for people who just put me in the room, and I would text them a thought. They'd say it out loud. Or I would ping them on the side. They said, I support you. Say it. I agree with you. It's smart.
Wow.
And so as much as I can do that for other people in the room who are a little bit shyer or maybe not as confident to say, that's a really great idea, you should say that. Even in that micro moment, it makes such a big impact to how people feel in those moments.
You would text someone a thought, and they would say it out
100%.
loud.
Because I didn't feel comfortable. It won't mean anything if it comes from me, from little old me. It was how I used to always envision it. Or they won't relate to me, or I'll have to translate it. Like, there were so many nuances of some of it was just my own maybe false perception of how I thought it would be. So a lot of it, I will admit, was probably self-inflicted. But I needed somebody who was more senior in the room, who had authority, who had agency to say, no, you're good, you're safe, speak up.
Yes.
And we need so much more of that in so many aspects of this world and this lifetime. But sometimes
everything.
That's all it takes is someone to see you and just encourage you in that way.
That's so amazing. This is turning into a PSA to come work for dope people at a dope company, because there's just so much of that not happening.
100%.
So much of that not happening. And we always hear from the stage and the panels, create a safe space and a seat for others. And once you even get a seat at the table, what you experience of not feeling like you had the voice to speak up is huge. Thank you for just being that open to understanding and meeting people where they are, reflecting on your own personal experiences to then now empower the newbies.
Have to.
That's so dope. Treating people how they treat you is something that you said to me when we spoke about this opportunity. What does that mean to you? And how can leaders who are maybe not open to diverse perspectives execute that in the agency space?
Yeah, there's a lot of work to be done on that in our industry still. And a lot of times it starts because there's no personal connection and there's no personal relationship. And this is just obviously my opinion. But there's a lot of times where I've struggled to maybe reach somebody or struggled to communicate with them. And I'm going through my list. I'm talking to people who I feel like they have good relationships with, and I'm like, help me crack this person. It's like, how do I crack this person? How do I get through? How do I make them see me, understand me, hear me? And you can have a list of all the things. This person likes to be approached in this way, loves to be talked to in this way.
They're a Virgo.
Right.
They've got a dog. Like.
Right. But none of those things matter if there's no relationship. And so for me, everything that I always talk about goes back to relationship and finding a moment to just have a human moment with people. And once you can do that and once you can connect, and sometimes it happens out of the office, let's go grab a coffee. And I don't want to talk about anything at work. What did life look like for you before you showed up?
Wow.
And you learn stories of people. Well, I have 2 kids. I have this. I'm dealing with this. This is my responsibility. I had the worst phone call with XYZ yesterday. And you start to build context to where people are coming from. And in that next moment of, hey, I need to say something. Can you hear me? They don't just, they see you and they hear you as a human being because they have now had some sort of connection to you that makes them want to lean in and listen. Whereas before, unfortunately, people are sometimes just looked at as numbers or employees, and everybody's just trying to move by so fast that they don't just take a step or stop to say, oh, this is a human person. This is I need to have a human moment. So for me, that is really how I've come to create understanding around treating people like you want to treat others. But you have to know who those people are. You have to know what are you bringing to the table. And sometimes that also takes waking up, coming to a meeting and saying, I'm not my best self today.
Yes.
I'm not my best self. And so you know me as this cheery, optimistic, always smiling, pep talking. But today I am not that.
Yeah.
And even that reframe is a human moment that allows people to start to connect with you a little bit differently.
That's so good because we're in such a fast-paced environment.
Oh, yeah.
Moving and shaking, agency work really doesn't stop, unfortunately. So when we talk about meeting people where they are, something that thematically that came through for me in what you were saying is empathy. And just understanding that everybody's not going to always have a good day. How do you create space if you've heard that from someone, maybe on your team or a peer or a colleague? What does that look like for you in action? Are you a Black girl in advertising? If so, we've created the most amazing space just for you. If you are ready to thrive and not just survive in this male-dominated space, if you want to lock arms, build community and culture with others that look like you, join her agency, The Collective, a place where we're having real conversations, doing the work, building our brands, taking up space, and owning our agency. See you there.
One of the things I was recently accepted to this leadership program called the Marketing Academy, and we did this big boot camp, and we learned so many things. It was 4 days, but one of the things that has stuck with me so much is that it is better to be uncomfortable than resentful.
Okay.
And I had to sit with that for a few days because I agree with you. It all comes down to empathy, but it is easier to have empathy. It is harder to have empathy for people when you see them in a negative light, right?
Okay,
when people are having a bad day, you want to go and be like, oh, I understand. But if their bad day is then tripling into, but they're treating people this way, this way, this way, it is so much harder to have empathy for people when that impact is firm and harsh, right? But so how do you really start to have empathy for kind of this persona that they might be putting on that day because they're trying to mask something that they maybe came to work with or that they're dealing with? It's hard to have empathy for someone's persona that they bring to work, but that is the thing you have to navigate through because it is better to be uncomfortable and address it in the moment and say, I know you're not having a good day. Here's the impact you're creating and the impact you're having on other people. Let's address it now so that people aren't resentful of the energy that you're bringing to the table later on. So that I live with that philosophy is that feedback is such a gift. And if you can really lean in and have hard conversations with people, it might be uncomfortable, and that's okay, but you won't be resentful, and you see a lot more growth and room in those relationships and that empathy and that growth in general when you're able to lean into that.
That's so good because we harbor a lot of resentment.
Oh, yes, we do.
We go home and we think about what we should have said.
Oh, yes, we do.
How we could have moved.
And our husbands know all the tea about everybody and everything.
Okay. Shout out to Mike, baby. He knew everything. He knew the clients. Whew. Yes, the pillow talk.
Oh, yeah.
The pillow talk.
It's real.
It is. But when you touch on the fact that creating an opportunity for people just to have a conversation in the moment, that's so huge.
Yeah.
Because then today is today. And when we leave at 5 o'clock or sometimes 7 o'clock, whatever it is, tomorrow we can start anew because I'm not harboring that resentment. And I look at you in a different light, too, as my leader, my peer, for creating the space to give me the grace to have that moment. And I think also something else that was just amazing. There's so many gems. Is tackling it in the moment creates so much awareness.
Yes.
Right? Yes. Because if for whatever reason the person that came to today with a negative attitude that was impacting multiple people, seeing it nipped in the bud or at least addressed in the moment creates a culture of non-tolerance.
Of candor.
Yes.
Transparency.
Being able to feel safe.
Yes.
Knowing that I won't have this toxic work situation that is perpetuated by leadership.
Yes.
There's so many.
And if I can add, I don't want to be naive in the fact that it took me a long time to get here and to get to this place of addressing it head on, because I think especially as Black women, there is always, but I don't want to come off as fill in the blank. And there's so many fill in the blanks, right? That I'm so exhausted of hearing because we're just human and we're allowed to be human.
And we should
be allowed to be human. And so it took me a long time to get that confidence. And I'm approaching you as Courtney in this moment. Right. And as Courtney, your friend, as Courtney, the person who we just went to dinner with the other week, or the person who I just went to your daughter's birthday party. That Courtney who cares, and I'm coming from that place. And it takes a long time to get there because you are overcoming perception and stereotypes and bias a lot of the time. But I just got to the point in my career where I can't not call out things. I can't not say things anymore. I can't be silent. And because if I'm silent, somebody's watching me be silent.
Facts.
And that is the biggest piece that I've really understood, is that not only for myself, but it's for people are always watching, especially when you think of next generation leaders. There's not a lot of us at the top still. No. And so they're watching how we act, how we behave, how we're received. And I just want to continue to keep showing people that if you speak up with respect and you show up with respect, you can get respect, hopefully in a different way than we've had to earn it so far in the past. Right. Yeah.
The leadership that you execute and the space that you create is going to impact and allow people to stay in longer. Yeah. Because Black people are leaving advertising left and right.
Yeah.
But Black women are leaving even quicker.
Yes.
Like in this moment, my LinkedIn timeline of those most impacted by layoffs, and mind you, I've got a very diverse LinkedIn, but I'm seeing it's over-indexed.
Yeah.
It truly is. And it's because spaces haven't been created for us to just be.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. And to just be, allow us to fail, allow us to succeed, allow us to learn, allow us to have grace for ourselves, for others. There's no equality or equity when it comes to who we give grace to, because I think that's where you see a lot of times there are some leaders, you see them and you're like, how did you get here? How are you still here? And what are we doing?
What's going on?
But clearly a lot of grace was given to you that you're still at the top.
That you're not affording others.
And you're not affording others. How do we really start to give people grace and give them the tools that they need to be successful? Because we have the same expectations for everybody, and that in itself is unfair.
Right.
Because a lot of people have different backgrounds and experiences and cultures and just everything that needs to be taken account. And managers have just become lazy. Like if we're just being real, they've become lazy.
Yes, the 9-box grid. Yes. Everybody doesn't fit in.
Nobody does, and they shouldn't, or they shouldn't. Well, they shouldn't. But we have become, the industry in itself has become such a place of I have to prove myself, that you forget about everybody else. And unfortunately, we get sucked into that, and we get lost in that, and we feel abandoned in that. And there's not enough of us at the top being like, hey, well, have you checked on so and so?
Right.
How are they doing?
Just on a
Because I heard that he or she is struggling last year, and now she's still saying that she's struggling. So what have you done?
What has changed
to help that situation? Not what she has done. What have you done to help create an environment for her to succeed? And sadly, the answer is, oh well, I didn't change anything.
Right.
And that is the saddest and biggest part. And I just think that there's a lot more work that can be done. But we can't always be the one to hold that burden.
We can't. And
because we get exhausted, and then you start to see us fall out and leave the industry.
And then who's there?
No
one.
And so we, Black women, we show up and we show out all the time. And we are ready for other people to step out and show up for us. But if I need to be present to educate on the how, or to be a reminder that this is a necessity, then I will continue to do that. But it can't just be us holding that every single time.
When people ask all the questions about, like, how do we fix DEI and how do we fix performative marketing, they oftentimes come and ask us. Yeah. And a lot of these problems aren't for us to fix. We didn't create them. We're just on the losing end of the stick.
Correct.
And I just would love for people to put more effort and energy into being the change. That leads me to something else about safe spaces. What does the ERG or BRG environment look like at the Martin Agency or any other agencies you've been in before? And how has that fueled community for you?
Yeah, so we have, I think it's 7 or 8 ERGs right now that are a mix of Black, AAPI, our Latina community, our LGBTQ community, even sustainability and women. And there's a whole range of ERGs for people to relate to at Martin, which is great.
Nice.
Mine specifically that I identify with is Ben, our Black Employee Network.
Yes.
And it has just been the best experience. I think for Martin Agency, it's in Richmond, Virginia.
Okay.
I moved from Atlanta to Richmond, as I mentioned before, where I walk outside and there's just culture everywhere in Atlanta.
Nice.
And so I needed to find that.
Right.
And that was in Atlanta.
Yes. I was
and
like,
I needed to find that in Virginia. I
Yeah.
had to. And Richmond has evolved in a lot of the best ways, which is really great. But I needed to figure out how do I not only make Martin my home, but Richmond my home. And what I learned is actually the Ben community really helped me do that, because it was people, again, who I could just go and I could just be. And I remember there was some Ben event, and there was somebody who wasn't in Ben who came up to us and were like, you guys just have so much joy and you look so happy. And I know that it had been a stressful week, but like, I want to bottle this because you look so happy. And we were like, because we're with our people.
We're with us.
We're with us, and we can just be, and we can just say, and we can just do, and we've seen each other in both our professional settings and outside of it. We know each other. We just we just grilled out the other weekend with our spouses, with our significant others. Like, we know each other.
Yeah.
And that is what I think is missing from a lot of it. It's like we find these spaces of community within these ERGs, which is great. But how do you bottle that to make it still more accepting for other people, or inclusive for other people to get to see what that magic that happens in our individual communities? Absolutely. Because I think that piece is so important too.
It is. I led the Onyx BRG at Digitas for almost 2 years. I picked up the mantle when it was just, it's a labor of love as a ERG or a BRG leader. But what I found oftentimes is, yes, we create community, but it was also very cathartic for people just to go in there and have conversations.
Absolutely.
What would be your recommendation for people who want to get involved in BRGs and ERGs, but they're more so introverts and they're not just really sure how to insert themselves comfortably in those spaces? Because once they get there, they blossom. I've seen it time and time again. Yeah. But what's your recommendation there for them?
Just showing up, because I think you can provide all the tools and the resources for people, but it's about what you do with them. And I understand that as an introvert, sometimes even being in those spaces is so overwhelming.
It is.
But so what I love to do is just encourage. You don't have to say anything. You don't have to sign up and immediately be the president of Ben or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
But just showing up and seeing how other people respond and seeing what those conversations were like. Obviously, the election happened, and we wanted to create moments for people to just be. And so there were some spaces where, if you want to talk about it, let's go talk about it, because we all needed a moment to release, and let's have that safe space. But also, if you just were tired of talking about it and you just wanted to sit and be in a quiet room and just exist, like, that was okay too. And we saw a lot of the more introverts kind of go in that space because they were like, I need time to process and digest what's happening, but I also know that I need community. And how can those two things exist? And so we made it happen, where it was, you had your community, it was a silent space, and we combined the two worlds. And so I think, but you have to show up, because the hardest part, I think, with navigating talent who are more introverted is, I have to know there's a problem in order to help you fix it.
Oh, say that.
And if you bottle it all up and hold it all in, which unfortunately a lot of our community and underrepresented communities do, we bottle it all up. Yeah. Nobody is ever going to know that things are wrong, and they're just going to think everything's okay and that you're okay with the way things are going. So even if you can just build up the courage to say, hey, I'm not okay, or I need help, or I actually don't want your advice, but I just need a hug.
Yeah.
Like, but you have to be the one to make that first statement of expression of what is it that you need, and then allow us to guide you from there. But I know that's tough for introverts, and I know sometimes you think about it all day long, and you're like,
locks you
I
up.
can't, I can't
"No,
do
I
a
can't."
thing.
Yeah.
But I just encourage even that one person who you feel safe with to go to them and allow them to connect you to, whether it's your ERG or BRG or whatever that might be, because the community exists and they want to welcome you. But we just need to know that you want to be welcomed.
Yeah, that's
That's
very
fair.
necessary. I love what you said earlier too about intersectionality of like a way for the BRGs to work together. You know, Afrocentrism. We tapped into the tech community when we were at BRG for Onyx, but then we also tapped into the Hispanic Latino community because for Hispanic Heritage Month, there's a lot of Afro-Latinos. What do you say about curating spaces for intersectionality in advertising and how we can just be better at it? Because even in the multicultural space, it's very segmented. We've got teams that focus in on AA. We've got teams that focus in on Hispanic and teams that focus in on AAPI. How can we create more of a mixing pot inside our own agencies to then affect the work?
You have to, because none of us are a monolith. We sit here, sure, on paper we identify as Black women, but if you really start to get to know each of us, I'm sure we'd be so different. And
Right.
I'm 100% sure we'd be so different.
Absolutely.
And we have to encourage that kind of next step of education to who we are and to who these segments are, if that makes sense. Because if people continue to act, whether it's in the work or in the agencies, like we're all the same, nothing is ever going to get done. And there's always going to be someone who feels left behind. And so I do think the key for intersectionality is awesome. And I think hopefully most ERGs is you're welcome to join and whatever you identify with. Like there's not a limit of you can only be in this one and that's it. And I'm glad because there are so many different aspects of ourselves that we need to be able to tap into and share and celebrate. And it's in that sharing and that celebration where you actually do find connection, because in moments where maybe you feel like, oh, I'm the only one who must identify like this, or I'm the only one who must feel like this. So often, more than not, when you express that, there's someone else that is like, oh, wait, no, me too.
Yes, girl,
I
me
see
too.
that too.
Yes.
I did that too. I've experienced that too.
Yes.
And so the intersectionality piece is huge. And it takes, again, yes, creating those spaces, yes, people participating in those spaces, but I think even more importantly, non-people of color, that's the right way to phrase that.
It works.
Need to also see and invest in that too. And I think we're here in LA, it's the AdColor conference here, and even educating people who I know want to go to AdColor who aren't a person of color or sometimes say, but it's not for me, I'm scared or I'm nervous. And why are you nervous? Are you scared to be in a space of love and of welcoming? And it's because people don't look like you. And so we need other people to take that extra step to just see the beauty in intersectionality, to see the beauty of celebration and the essence of our joy when we're in these spaces, because it can't just be moments like AdColor. It can't just be moments like other conference spaces. We need to feel this feeling within our own agency walls and recreate this feeling that we all feel when we come back in our agency walls. And that's only achieved by being able to have spaces where every parts of us are welcome, and again, allowing for sharing and celebration.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. Business development. Let's get back there.
Let's do it.
So we know Chief Growth Officer is on the horizon. Like, it's coming. we're putting that in the ethers. What are you excited about over the next 6 to 12 months about how you're going to approach this work?
That's a really great question. I think the next 6 months, the whole advertising landscape is going to shift. I think it's going to be very different. I think, not to get into politics or anything, but I just think the way that this world and this environment is changing is going to reflect in the way we show up in advertising. And it's going to change how we approach people. It's going to change how we approach the work. And so I'm actually really excited to see how that industry ebbs and flows, because it's going to force us to adjust. It's going to force us to approach people differently, approach the work differently. And so I hope this is not a non-answer to your question, but I don't know yet, and that's what excites me.
That is exciting.
And
right?
I don't, because there's not necessarily a playbook for how do you navigate this new moment for culture and this new moment for time. And all you can do is see it happen and hopefully plan 2 steps ahead and then help your people react to it in that way.
That's beautiful. So that's on a professional level.
Yeah.
Personally, what are you excited for? What's get you out of bed?
Personally, I just got married in September.
Yay,
so that is really
congrats.
exciting.
Yes.
And so I'm really excited to just be married to my husband and call him my husband. And that's a really great thing.
She's married now.
I'm excited to just like bring our families together and just continue to just build. And I feel like we've just had all these dreams for what we wanted our life to be. And for some reason, it just felt like when we got married, now it unlocks and we can do all the things. And so I'm just really excited to just spend more time figuring out like who this next version of ourselves is. That I think we get a lot of advice of you got to really know the person because that person's going to change over and over and over again, right?
Yeah.
And again, that's so exciting.
And it is a new version. When you get married, it is a new version.
And I'm excited to understand who Courtney Williams is
Yes.
and who she is now, who she's going to be, and just keep leaning into it and just be curious. Just be curious about myself and what are the things that I want, because I'm sure that's going to change. What are the things I need? I'm sure that's going to change, and just do it in service of me and my family. And
that's beautiful.
That's all I can ask for.
I love that. I love that. So before we wrap, 3 key takeaways.
Okay.
3. There were so many. Like we didn't even for real get out of the first question with all the gems that you dropped. However, let's wrap up with 3 key takeaways from this conversation that we just had for anybody new.
Well, number 1, I'm going to start off by reminding everybody that I am a VP head of business development at Martin Agency.
Tell them.
So you can never say that you don't know anybody who works in new business in this industry. And I say that genuinely because new business is a really viable career path for a lot of people in this industry. And a lot of people that look like us are some of the best representatives of the power of who our agencies can be and who our people can be. And I want people to know that. I want people to understand that my job is all about building our brand and having a point of view. If you can help build a brand and have a point of view, you can do new business. Absolutely. And we can help you do that. And so I just want to encourage, if anybody's interested in new business, find me on LinkedIn, and I'm more than happy to have conversations about what this career path could mean for you and how to get into it. That's like my first one.
That's dope.
The second one is just I love my Black women, and I just think there's a spirit of sisterhood, an innate sisterhood, that when we see each other, it's here and we get it.
Yes.
And I just want to remind all of us that like we are valued, and the world loves to remind us sometimes that it's still hard out here for us, but when we can band together and we can do things like this and have conversations like this and celebrate each other and love on each other and motivate each other, we can still keep going. And I think we have proven time and time again that we are stronger than we think that we are. And I just want to continue to be a reminder that we're fucking awesome, and I love us. Yes, and it's time for the world to recognize that and love us back. And when it gets hard, just like keep going, and just know that we hopefully have each other to keep moving that forward.
The crown may shift.
The crown may shift, 100%. Okay. And then I guess just the last thing is, it maybe it kind of falls on that, but I just encourage other people to step up.
Yeah.
Everybody needs to step up, and about making sure that you're grounded in who you are first before you make those moves. And I'm not saying everybody should go out here and like tell everybody their business and their plans and their goals, and some things you need to keep to yourself until you figure it out. But if you have something that you are super clear on, share it with your community, share it with the people who can also help keep you accountable for your goals, because I genuinely believe that you are going to be your best advocate. But you also need the support of people to help push you there. We are so much better all together than we are on our own. And so take some time to get to know you and figure out what you want, and build a tribe of people around you who are just going to encourage you and motivate you until you get there. And then you have this moment again, and then you get somewhere else. Yes. But you need that tribe. And I think for me, a sense of self, a strong tribe is what's really brought me to where I am today, and hopefully going to keep propelling me forward.
Oh, it will.
But people just need to have that and make space for it, make time for it, make space to nurture and care for it in the same way you do for your romantic relationships. Do that with your tribe.
Yes.
Because the benefit when we're all at the top and we've all met our goals and we can look around and say we did this together is such a beautiful thing magical, to be able to experience.
So thank you so much.
No, thank you.
Those were three gems. Thank you. You've poured so much into the community. I know that they're going to get a lot of value from this conversation. So thanks for pulling up with her agency today.
Thanks for having me.